Ancient cities thrived for centuries without any electricity at all. We often assume that intelligence is a modern trait tied to our advanced technology, but long before power lines, entire civilizations mastered their environments in ways that can leave us in awe. This video will reveal the forgotten secrets behind their sustainable urban designs, giving you a powerful blueprint for a greener future. How did a desert metropolis stay cool without air conditioning? And what hidden water systems supported populations in the driest of lands? What do you believe is the most important lesson we have forgotten from these ancient masters? The bustling heart of an ancient metropolis felt alive, not in spite of nature, but because of it. Every street, every building, every public space was a deliberate component of a larger, living system. This is the true meaning of environmental mastery. It was not about conquering the wild, but about weaving a city so seamlessly into its surroundings that it became an extension of the landscape itself. Historians like John D. H. argue these urban centers were not primitive settlements. They were pinnacles of sophisticated ecological integration, operating on a deep understanding of natural principles to create comfort, resilience, and sustainability long before the concept of an external power grid even existed. This mastery touched everything. It was in the precise alignment of a building to catch a cool summer breeze or a low winter sun, a direct application of local climate knowledge. It was in the design of a water channel that served for drinking, for irrigation, and for cooling the air as it flowed. Every element served multiple purposes, creating a closed loop where waste was minimized and efficiency was paramount. Think of a single stone in an arch, bearing weight, directing forces, and defining a space all at once. Ancient cities were built with that same multi-functional intelligence, but on a grand urban scale. So what could our own cities, often working against the grain of their environments, learn from this foundational wisdom? How might our glass towers and concrete expanses transform if we re-embraced the principle of working with nature rather than overpowering it? This core idea of intelligent integration sets the stage for us to uncover the first and perhaps most crucial of their sustainable secrets. The success of an entire civilization could rest upon a single, deliberate choice of location. Before a single stone was laid, ancient planners would walk the land, reading the terrain like a map of future possibilities. They were not seeking empty space, they were seeking partnership with the earth itself. This first step, site selection, was the ultimate act of foresight, a masterstroke that would define a city's health, security, and prosperity for generations. The Roman architect Vitruvius laid out clear principles for this, advising that a city be placed on high ground, away from swampy marshes, to ensure good drainage for health and to catch the cleansing winds for ventilation. Proximity to a fresh river was not just a convenience, it was the lifeblood, enabling agriculture, providing drinking water, and serving as a natural highway for trade and communication. But look beyond the textbook principles to a place like Machu Picchu, perched impossibly on a mountain ridge in the Andes. Its location was a breathtaking display of environmental intelligence. By building on that crest, the Inca engineers avoided the deadly floods that could ravage the valley floors below. More than that, they harnessed the mountain's own thermal dynamics. The stone structures absorbed the sun's heat by day and released it slowly by night, moderating the harsh cold, while the precise positioning of buildings channeled the wind for natural cooling. This was an intuitive, masterful grasp of microclimates, turning a challenging location into a self-sustaining habitat. Every strategic advantage woven into the geography, meant one less problem that required a technological solution later. It reduced the need for artificial defenses, complex irrigation to correct a bad water source, or structures to combat perpetual dampness. The land itself did the work. So when we see the ruins of these cities today, we are not just looking at fallen stones, we are witnessing the enduring legacy of a profound conversation between human ambition and the natural world. This foundational wisdom set the stage for the next act of genius, where architecture rose from the chosen ground to complete this symphony of sustainable living. A cool breeze drifted through a Persian home, yet not a single fan blade turned. This was the magic of the windcatcher, a towering structure that reached above the rooftops to capture the slightest gust and channel it down into the living spaces below. Entire cities were kept comfortable by such passive cooling systems, an architectural ballet that used physics itself as its choreographer. The principles were deceptively simple and universally applied. In Egypt, the architect Hassan Fathi championed the use of massive, thick walls made from mud brick. These walls possessed a high thermal mass, acting like a thermal battery. They would diligently absorb the scorching heat of the sun all day long, preventing it from penetrating the interior. Then, as the desert night grew cold, they would slowly release that stored warmth, maintaining a remarkably stable and comfortable temperature inside. This was climate control written not in code but in clay and stone. But the genius did not stop at the walls. Look at the intricate mashrabiyah, the ornate wooden screens that graced windows across the Middle East. They were far more than decorative art. They provided essential privacy for inhabitants while being perfectly designed to break up the hot, dry wind into a gentle, diffused breeze, cooling and humidifying the air as it entered the room. Even the shape of the rooms played a role. Vaulted and domed ceilings, seen from Roman bathhouses to grand mosques, encouraged hot air to rise and accumulate high above the heads of the occupants, where it could then be vented out, pulling cooler air in from below. Every element, from the grandest arch to the smallest window screen, worked in concert. Step wells in India, like magnificent inverted temples, provided water access, while their deeply recessed staircases created naturally cool, subterranean environments for community gatherings. So why did we ever abandon such elegant, energy-free solutions? The shift to mechanical systems promised universal, on-demand control, but it came at the cost of severing our built environment from its natural context. This intricate dance between architecture and air finds its perfect partner in the ancient mastery of another vital element, the life-giving flow of water. A desert city did not simply pray for rain, it designed for it. While grand architecture shaped the air, a hidden world of water systems pulsed beneath the streets, turning the most challenging landscapes into oases of abundance. The ancient approach to water was not about fighting scarcity, but about orchestrating its every movement. They captured it, guided it, stored it, and revered it, creating a resilient, self-replenishing cycle that modern engineers still study with admiration. Take the Nabateans of Petra, who carved a magnificent city from rose-red cliffs in a region receiving barely any annual rainfall. Their secret was a network of meticulously engineered dams, terraces, and cisterns. They designed the very landscape to be a catchment area, channeling every sudden, violent downpour into a series of underground reservoirs. Not a single drop was allowed to escape. This was not just collection, it was total water conservation. A system so effective it supported a population of thousands in the heart of the desert. Meanwhile, in the swamplands of the Valley of Mexico, the Aztecs built their majestic capital, Tenochtitlan, on an island. They surrounded it with a grid of canals that served as transportation routes, but also as a complex circulatory system for managing lake water. They constructed Chinampas, floating gardens of woven reeds and rich mud, which created unbelievably fertile farmland from the lakebed itself. These were not mere fields, they were living, filtering systems that cleaned the water while producing food, a perfect example of a closed-loop cycle. And we cannot forget the gravity-defying Roman aqueducts, which moved water over dozens of miles without a single pump, or the Persian qanats, subterranean tunnels that tapped into mountain aquifers and delivered fresh water to arid plains without any of it being lost to evaporation. These systems did more than just supply a resource. They prevented floods by managing runoff. They recharged the groundwater for future generations, and they turned entire regions into fertile, livable spaces. So how can our own concrete-covered cities, which often treat rainwater as a waste product to be funneled away as quickly as possible, begin to replicate this ancient wisdom? The answer lies in seeing water not as a problem to be managed, but as a precious participant in the urban ecosystem. This profound understanding of how to live with a place, rather than simply on it, extended from the hidden water channels upward to shape the very blueprint of the city itself. The streets themselves were designed to breathe. In the meticulously planned city of Mohenjo-Daro, wide main avenues were not just for grand processions, they were engineered to function as wind corridors. These broad streets were precisely aligned to catch the prevailing cool breezes, funneling them deep into the urban heart to flush out stifling heat and the smoke from countless hearths. This was urban planning as a form of natural air conditioning. The genius extended to the smaller passages, where narrow alleys intentionally created a venturi effect, accelerating the wind as it squeezed through, turning a gentle gust into a refreshing, localized draft for the residents living there. Historians like Spiro Kostov point out that even the classic grid patterns of Greek cities were not merely about order. They were deliberate tools for cross-ventilation, allowing air to flow freely between buildings rather than becoming trapped in stagnant pockets. In stark contrast, the tightly clustered buildings of desert towns served a different but equally intelligent purpose, their close proximity casting deep, cooling shadows on one another, dramatically reducing the sun's brutal impact on the streets and walls. Public squares and central courtyards were not empty spaces. They acted as the city's lungs, expansive areas where air could circulate freely, cool down, and be drawn back into the surrounding neighborhoods, all while serving as hubs for community life. From the strategic layouts of Carthage to the walled cities of Chinese dynasties, the blueprint of a city was its first and most important environmental defense. So when we look at our own modern urban canyons, where tall buildings often block the wind and concrete absorbs heat, we must ask what fundamental principles of breathability we have overlooked. This conscious manipulation of air through urban design was only possible because of the thoughtful selection of the very materials that built these ancient wonders. The very stone and clay that built these cities were chosen not just for their strength, but for their intelligence. Builders would quarry rock from a nearby hillside or craft bricks from the local earth, an approach that drastically reduced the energy needed for transport and allowed structures to blend seamlessly into the landscape as if they had grown from the ground itself. This was not mere aesthetics, it was a profound understanding of material symbiosis. Ancient cities overwhelmingly prioritized materials that were locally abundant, naturally durable, and thermally efficient. Adobe, a simple mix of earth, water, and straw, was a superstar of sustainable building. Research by environmental historians highlights how the Pueblo people expertly used sun-dried mud bricks to construct their iconic dwellings. These thick walls acted as a natural thermal buffer, diligently absorbing the desert's intense heat all day to keep interiors cool, and then slowly releasing that stored warmth throughout the cold night, creating a stable, comfortable environment that adapted perfectly to extreme temperature swings. In the humid, storm-prone regions of Southeast Asia, the material wisdom shifted to bamboo and thatch. These lightweight, flexible materials allowed for buildings that could breathe, letting moisture escape and air circulate freely, while their inherent flexibility gave them a remarkable ability to withstand powerful monsoon winds. These choices did more than just conserve resources. They created buildings that aged gracefully, their eventual decay a simple return to the ecosystem from which they came. So why did modern construction largely abandon this localized, bioclimatic logic? The shift towards standardized, energy-intensive materials like steel and concrete promised uniformity and speed, but it came at the cost of divorcing our buildings from their specific environmental context, forcing us to rely on massive amounts of energy to correct for their inherent thermal shortcomings. This deep material wisdom, rooted in a place and its specific climate, naturally extended to how these cities fed themselves, creating a world where farms were not separate from the urban fabric, but woven directly into its heart. A city that feeds itself is a city truly alive. This was the final, brilliant layer of ancient environmental mastery, where agriculture was not a distant industry but an integrated part of the urban landscape. Stroll through the legendary Hanging Gardens of Babylon, a wonder built not just for beauty but for bounty, or walk the vibrant Chinampas of Tenochtitlan, where floating gardens of woven reeds and rich mud turned a lake into a continuous harvest. These were not mere decorations or fringe experiments. They were the very lungs and larder of the city. Urban agriculture took countless ingenious forms, from rooftop gardens that insulated buildings and grew herbs, to the breathtaking terraced farms that sculpted mountainsides. These systems did far more than just provide fresh produce. They created rich microclimates where the transpiration from countless plants cooled the surrounding air and enhanced local biodiversity, attracting pollinators and strengthening the entire urban ecosystem. Agricultural experts highlight how this integration slashed food miles to virtually zero, ensuring that what people ate was hyper-local and incredibly fresh. The vegetation acted as a natural air filter, cleaning urban pollution, while the soil and root systems became a built-in stormwater management tool, absorbing rainwater naturally and reducing the risk of floods. Look at the Inca's Andes, those magnificent terraces carved into the steep Andes. They were a masterclass in land stewardship. By creating these stepped farms, Inca engineers prevented catastrophic soil erosion on the unstable slopes. More than that, they maximized every possible inch of arable land in a rugged environment, using intricate stonework to retain water and create distinct microclimates on each level, allowing a diverse range of crops to flourish at different altitudes. This was a truly symbiotic relationship where the urban and rural elements supported and enhanced one another, blurring the lines between the two. This holistic integration guaranteed food security and maintained a profound ecological balance, making ancient cities remarkably self-reliant. So how might we apply this wisdom to our modern urban food deserts, those areas where fresh, affordable produce is a rarity? Reintegrating farms into our cities could transform vacant lots into community gardens and flat rooftops into productive green spaces, addressing both nutritional poverty and environmental strain. This physical and practical harmony between a city and its sustenance was ultimately rooted in something even deeper, a worldview that saw the environment not as a resource to be used, but as a sacred partner to be honored. The stones of their cities were not just placed, they were oriented. A temple's doorway might frame the rising sun on the summer solstice, flooding the inner sanctum with light on that single, sacred day. A sacred grove of ancient trees was preserved at the city's heart, a living sanctuary where the divine was believed to reside. This was not mere architecture or landscaping. It was a physical manifestation of a core belief, a worldview that saw no separation between the human spirit and the natural world. Ancient environmental mastery was rooted in something far deeper than practicality. It was woven into the very fabric of their culture and spirituality. Anthropologists like Mircea Eliade documented how entire cosmologies were built around this interconnection. Myths and deities personified the forces of nature. A river was not just a water source, it was a goddess to be honored. A forest was not just timber, it was the home of spirits to be respected. This spiritual framework transformed environmental stewardship from a chore into a sacred duty. To pollute a river was to insult a deity. To cut down a protected grove was to invite divine wrath. These beliefs created powerful, self-enforcing cultural norms for conservation that lasted for generations. Nowhere is this fusion more beautifully evident than in the steppe wells of India. These magnificent structures, known as baolis or vav, were far more than feats of engineering. They were subterranean temples, their steps descending into the earth like a pilgrimage into the womb of the world. Carved with intricate sculptures of gods and goddesses, they were places of community gathering, ritual, and prayer. The cultural imperative to keep a sacred space pure ensured that the water within was protected from contamination, a perfect marriage of spiritual reverence and practical necessity that guaranteed a clean, reliable water supply for all. This deep, culturally ingrained respect fostered a long-term perspective that is often elusive in our modern world. Harming the environment was not just an economic misstep, it was a spiritual transgression with consequences for the entire community. So what can we learn from these ancient cultural frameworks? It suggests that for sustainability to be truly enduring, it must move beyond regulations and technology and tap into our deeper values, into a shared sense of reverence for the systems that sustain us. This collective responsibility, where every citizen played a role in upholding these sacred principles, was the final, crucial element that bound the entire system together, creating a society where environmental care was simply a way of life. A community was the ultimate guardian of its own survival. In the heart of ancient Mesopotamia, village councils did not simply distribute water, they governed it with a profound sense of shared destiny. They gathered to allocate irrigation rights, ensuring every farmer received a fair share, and they enforced strict rules to maintain the communal forests that protected their water sources and provided building materials. This was not a top-down dictatorship, nor was it a free-for-all. It was a deeply embedded system of community-based resource management, where the responsibility for the upkeep, distribution, and conservation of life's essentials was a collective duty. The well-being of the individual was inextricably linked to the health of the whole. Look to the meticulously kept records of medieval Europe, where open field systems were managed by the entire village. Farmers would collectively decide which fields would be planted and which would lie fallow, a practice of crop rotation that prevented the soil from becoming exhausted and barren. Irrigation schedules were not suggestions, they were communal law, enforced by the very people who depended on them, ensuring that water flowed equitably to all. This decentralized model meant that the people with the most intimate, localized knowledge were the ones making the critical decisions. They could see when a forest was being over-harvested, they knew when a water channel needed repair, and they could adapt their rules to a changing season or a new challenge with a speed and precision that a distant ruler never could. Perhaps the most beautiful expression of this is found in the Andes with the enduring principle of Aini. This was a system of reciprocity, a sacred cycle of mutual aid. If your neighbor helped you maintain your family's terraced farm, you were obligated to return the labor, creating a web of shared responsibility that strengthened the entire community's infrastructure and its social fabric. These collaborative models were brilliant because they created built-in incentives for sustainability. Overexploiting a shared resource hurt everyone, including yourself, so conservation became a matter of immediate, practical necessity. How can our modern, often disconnected societies revive such a spirit of participatory governance, where we feel a direct stake in the health of our local water, land, and air? This deeply ingrained ethic of collective care and shared resources naturally created a world where nothing was considered waste, and everything had a purpose in a continuous cycle of use and reuse. Nothing was ever truly wasted in the ancient world. A broken clay pot was not thrown away, it was crushed and mixed into the mortar for a new wall, adding strength and structure. The ash from a cooking fire did not pile up as refuse, it was carefully collected to be used in making soap or even in strengthening plaster. Every scrap of organic waste, from food remains to animal manure, was destined to become rich compost for the fields, completing a vital nutrient cycle that fed the soil that fed the people. This was not mere scavenging or frugality. It was a deeply ingrained philosophy of a circular economy, where the very concept of waste was redefined as a misplaced resource. Archaeological digs at sites like Pompeii reveal something astonishing, evidence that households systematically separated materials like glass, metal, and pottery for reprocessing and reuse. The city itself functioned as a metabolic system where outputs from one process became inputs for another. In ancient China, this principle was perfected with the meticulous collection of what was termed night soil. Human waste was not a sanitation problem to be disposed of, but a valuable commodity, carefully gathered and transported to fertilize the vast agricultural lands surrounding the cities. This practice closed the nutrient loop with remarkable efficiency, returning precious phosphorus and nitrogen directly to the food production system and preventing the contamination of water sources that plague so many modern cities. Why then did we ever abandon such sensible, closed-loop systems? The Industrial Revolution championed a new, linear model of take, make, and dispose, a model that viewed endless resources going in and endless waste coming out as a sign of progress and prosperity. This shift fundamentally broke the ancient cycle, creating the pollution and landfill crises we grapple with today. By studying these historical practices, we are not looking at primitive survival, but at the very roots of modern sustainability concepts like cradle-to-cradle design and the circular economy. They understood that a healthy city, like a healthy forest, generates no waste, only resources for the next cycle of growth. This holistic wisdom, which viewed everything from a food scrap to a sunbeam as a valuable part of the system, finds its ultimate expression in how these cities harnessed the power of the sun itself, not with panels but with pure, brilliant design. The sun was their furnace, and they paid no heating bill. Passive solar design represents the pinnacle of ancient architectural intelligence, a practice of building in direct conversation with the sun's daily journey and seasonal cycles. A Roman bathhouse, for instance, was meticulously oriented with expansive windows facing south. These windows were designed to capture the low, weak rays of the winter sun, allowing its warmth to penetrate deep into the stone-lined rooms, heating the space naturally for the comfort of its patrons. In the summer, the story changed completely. The high, intense sun would be blocked by strategically placed overhangs or porticos. Its heat denied entry to keep the interiors cool and shaded. This was not a single trick but a complete system. The principle of thermal mass was crucial here. The same thick stone floors and walls that absorbed heat by day would release it slowly throughout the cold night, acting as a natural, self-regulating thermal battery. The Roman architect Vitruvius wrote extensively about this, detailing how homes in the Mediterranean were aligned to the precise path of the sun, using shaded colonnades for summer coolness and open exposures for winter warmth. This wisdom appeared independently across the globe. Look at the ancestral Puebloan cliff dwellings in the American Southwest, built into south-facing alcoves. These natural overhangs provided shade in the scorching summer, while in the winter, when the sun rode lower in the sky, its rays could reach deep inside to warm the living spaces. On the other side of the world, the traditional Japanese Minka farmhouse featured incredibly long, deep eaves. These elegant extensions shaded the home from the high summer sun, while allowing the lower winter light to slide beneath them and warm the interior. They even used translucent paper shoji screens to diffuse the light softly, preventing glare while still capturing solar heat. This was a truly intelligent, localized, and energy-free approach to comfort. So why does so much of our modern architecture seem to ignore the sun, creating glass boxes that overheat in summer and demand massive energy for heating in winter? The answer lies not in a lack of technology, but in a forgotten principle of design humility, of working with the sun's free energy rather than fighting it with mechanical systems. This fundamental understanding of solar harmony finds a perfect partner in the ancient use of another natural element, the living, breathing presence of urban greenery. A Persian garden was far more than a collection of pretty flowers. It was a meticulously engineered ecosystem, a living machine designed for cooling, tranquility, and life. Wandering through these spaces, you would feel the temperature drop, hear the buzz of insects, and smell the damp earth near a central water channel. This was not a luxury, it was a necessity woven into the urban fabric. Across the ancient world, from the sacred groves of Greece to the plaza trees of Maya cities, green spaces were fundamental infrastructure. They combated the urban heat island effect long before the term existed. The shade from a canopy of trees could lower ground temperatures significantly, while the process of transpiration, where plants release water vapor, acted like a natural evaporative cooler for the entire area. Historical texts like the letters of Pliny the Younger lavish detail on the gardens of Roman villas, describing them not just as places for leisure, but as essential retreats that moderated the microclimate around the home, making it bearable during the sweltering summer heat. In Maya cities, these green spaces were deeply functional. Trees planted in large public plazas did more than provide shade. Their extensive root systems anchored the soil, preventing erosion during heavy tropical rains. Cultivated plots and gardens attracted a diversity of pollinators and birds, which in turn supported greater agricultural yields in the surrounding farmlands. This created a resilient, interconnected ecosystem where the city and its natural surroundings supported one another. The air was cleaner, the atmosphere was cooler, and the presence of nature provided a documented boost to mental well-being, a fact our modern psychology is only now quantifying. So what would it take to reintegrate such lush, biodiverse landscapes into our concrete-dominated metros? It requires a shift in perspective, to see a park not as a decorative amenity, but as a vital organ in the city's body, a functional system that manages water, cleans air, and cools streets. This profound understanding of living with nature rather than paving over it provided these cities with their greatest strength, an inherent resilience that allowed them to withstand and recover from the disasters that inevitably came. A city could not simply survive, it had to endure. When the ground itself trembled or the skies unleashed torrents, ancient urban centers relied on more than just hope. They were physically engineered to bend without breaking. This was disaster resilience built into the very bones of a settlement, a profound understanding that the environment included not just gentle breezes and fertile soil, but also its most violent and unpredictable forces. In ancient Crete, the Minoans constructed their palaces with ashlar masonry, fitting stones together with such precision that the walls could shift and settle during an earthquake without catastrophic collapse. Across the world, in the monsoon-drenched regions of Southeast Asia, entire villages were built on sturdy wooden stilts, elevating homes safely above the predictable floodwaters, a simple yet brilliant adaptation that turned a seasonal threat into a manageable event. This philosophy of yielding to force rather than rigidly opposing it reached an apex in the pagodas of Japan. These elegant structures were not anchored by rigid nails, but instead used a complex system of interlocking wooden brackets. When a tremor struck, the entire pagoda would sway gracefully like a tall tree in the wind, dissipating the earthquake's energy and allowing it to settle back into place unharmed. The builders understood that flexibility was a far greater strength than brittle rigidity. Meanwhile, in the meticulously planned cities of the Indus Valley, like Mohenjo-Daro, resilience was woven into the urban fabric itself. The city's central citadel was raised high on a massive man-made mound, a fortress against floodwaters. Below, an extensive and covered drainage network channeled away excess monsoon rain with breathtaking efficiency, preventing the standing water that could lead to disease and structural damage. These were not reactive repairs made after a disaster. They were proactive measures, investments in long-term security that reduced vulnerability and saved countless lives through sheer foresight. How can our own cities, often built on rigid, unforgiving concrete, learn to sway and adapt like these ancient marvels? This relentless pursuit of safety and harmony through design finds its ultimate expression in a more subtle, yet profoundly powerful, layer of ancient intelligence, the mysterious language of sacred geometry. These precise mathematical ratios were the silent language of the cosmos, etched into stone. Sacred geometry was the belief that certain shapes and proportions held a divine, universal order, and by building with this language, ancient architects could align a city or temple with the very harmony of the heavens. This was not just about creating beautiful spaces, it was about constructing environments that resonated with a deeper, spiritual frequency. Scholars like Keith Critchlow dedicated their lives to decoding this visual language, revealing how principles like the golden ratio were not abstract curiosities but practical tools for optimizing everything from space usage to acoustics. A Greek theater, for instance, was not a random semicircle. Its carefully calculated curvature and stepped seating acted as a natural sound amplifier, allowing a single actor's voice to carry clearly to thousands of spectators without any electronic assistance. The very shape of the space conducted the human voice with perfect clarity. In the soaring vaults of Gothic cathedrals, this geometry reached for the divine. The intricate patterns of ribbed vaults and the precise proportions of the nave were calculated to draw the eye and the spirit upward, creating an awe-inspiring experience that was as much about acoustic perfection and structural stability as it was about religious devotion. This wisdom appeared independently across the globe. The Egyptians aligned their pyramids with celestial precision, their sides facing the cardinal directions with an accuracy that still baffles modern surveyors. In Mesoamerica, the entire city of Teotihuacan was laid out as a terrestrial map of the cosmos, with the Pyramid of the Sun and the Pyramid of the Moon positioned in a sacred relationship that mirrored the heavens above. This intentional design fostered a profound sense of balance and connection for its inhabitants, making the city itself a living, breathing calendar and a monument to cosmic order. So what practical insights can these ancient mathematical foundations offer our own, often chaotic urbanism? The lesson is that proportional harmony is not a luxury. it is a fundamental component of human well-being. Spaces that feel right, that are balanced and scaled to our humanity, inherently improve our daily experience. This deep understanding of how form influences feeling leads us directly to the final, most holistic application of ancient genius, the deliberate creation of microclimates. A garden was a climate control device, meticulously sculpted to change the very air you breathed. Ancient Chinese scholars perfected this art, designing landscapes where a pond was not just for beauty, but to cool a summer breeze as it passed over the water's surface. A carefully placed grove of bamboo served as a living windbreak, shielding a courtyard from harsh winter winds, while a strategically positioned rock formation could capture and radiate the sun's warmth, creating a sheltered nook on a cold day. This was microclimate creation, the deliberate manipulation of a small, localized environment to enhance human comfort, and it was a cornerstone of intelligent urban design. The principles were universal. In the sun-drenched courtyards of the Alhambra in Spain, the air was perpetually fresh and cool. This was no accident. The constant, gentle sound of fountains did more than please the ear. The evaporation from their spray naturally humidified and chilled the air, while the deep shadows of covered walkways and the lush vegetation created a refuge from the intense heat outside. On the other side of the continent, Viking longhouses were nestled against earthen berms, mounds of soil piled against their walls. These berms acted as natural insulation, buffering the interior from the bitter cold of Scandinavian winters and the penetrating winds, drastically reducing the need for firewood. This was not about grand technological interventions, but about using the landscape itself as a tool. A city that understood this could plant a row of dense evergreens to block a prevailing winter wind, or it could preserve a wetland within its boundaries to act as a natural swamp cooler during the hottest months. Every pond, every grove of trees, every green wall was a passive, energy-free system working to moderate temperature and humidity. So how can our own urban parks transform from simple grassy plots into dynamic climate moderators? What if the tree you sit under was chosen not just for its shade, but for its ability to cool the entire city block through transpiration? This ancient wisdom of sculpting the immediate environment for comfort leads us directly to another facet of their genius, the way they moved people and goods with a similar, profound efficiency. Their roads were arteries of stone, pulsing with the lifeblood of trade and communication across continents. The Roman Empire's famed highways were marvels of efficiency, paved with stone and laid out in remarkably straight lines to shorten travel distances for legions, merchants, and messengers. This was a transportation network designed for a world without fuel, relying entirely on the sustainable power of human and animal strength. The genius of ancient connectivity, however, went far beyond just roads. It was a holistic system where the entire city was planned for low-impact movement. Compact, dense urban layouts meant that most daily needs were within a short walk, drastically reducing the necessity for long journeys. This foundational principle of walkability was seamlessly integrated with other modes of transport. Canals crisscrossed cities like veins, allowing goods to be moved by barge with incredible ease, while ports were not just gaps in the shoreline, but intelligently designed machines. Historical geographers have studied the harbor of Carthage, revealing how its circular design was engineered to leverage natural currents and prevailing winds. Ships could enter and be guided to their berths with minimal effort, drastically reducing the need for exhaustive rowing or costly towing by teams of slaves or animals. The system itself did the work. This philosophy of working with the terrain rather than flattening it reached its zenith in the Andes. The Inca trail system was a web of connectivity woven directly into the mountainside. Instead of blasting through peaks, they built elegant stone stairways that ascended steep slopes. Instead of diverting rivers, they suspended breathtaking rope bridges across chasms. This respectful approach promoted accessibility across a vast empire without causing the widespread deforestation and erosion that often accompanies modern road construction. These networks were the quiet engines of prosperous economies, moving goods, people, and ideas while leaving a remarkably light environmental footprint. So why have we built modern transit systems that often seem to work against these very principles, prioritizing speed over sustainability and creating urban sprawl that makes walking impossible? The ancient approach to mobility shows us that true efficiency is not about raw speed, but about intelligent design that minimizes energy expenditure at every turn. This mastery of movement through clever design finds a parallel in their next great innovation, the art of harvesting energy directly from the world around them. A river did not just quench thirst, it turned the millstones that ground a city's grain. Long before the concept of a power plant, ancient civilizations were masters of harnessing the ambient energy that flowed freely through their world. They looked at a rushing stream and saw a source of mechanical force. They felt a steady wind and envisioned a pump for their fields, transforming nature's constant motion into practical, sustainable work. This was not a fringe practice, but a cornerstone of their operational logic, a way to accomplish monumental tasks without depleting finite resources. In ancient Rome, massive water wheels were a common sight along rivers, their wooden paddles turned by the current to power mills for grinding flour, saving countless hours of human labor. Across the world in Persia, vertical windmills with their cleverly designed sails caught the desert winds to draw water from deep underground for irrigation, turning arid plains into productive land. The ingenuity did not stop there. The Greeks were known to use polished bronze shields as burning mirrors, concentrating sunlight to create a focused point of intense heat, a rudimentary but effective form of solar power. Historical records from China describe kites, not just for recreation, but tethered to large, ground-based mechanisms to harness wind energy for tasks like pumping water or even lifting heavy building materials. These were not just gadgets, they were sophisticated applications of physics, elegant in their simplicity and profound in their impact. They demonstrate a society actively engaging with its energy environment, converting the kinetic and thermal energy all around them into direct, useful applications. So why did we ever transition away from these decentralized, renewable systems? The rise of fossil fuels like coal and oil promised a new kind of power, one that was dense, portable, and seemingly limitless, enabling industrialization on a scale previously unimaginable. But this shift came with a hidden cost, centralizing energy production and distancing us from the direct, participatory relationship our ancestors had with the forces that powered their lives. By studying these ancient methods, we are not looking at primitive technology, but at the very origins of our modern renewable energy movement, a reminder that the most sustainable power is often that which works in concert with the planet's own rhythms. This decentralized wisdom, perfected in one region, rarely stayed isolated. It traveled, carried along the very trade routes that connected these brilliant ancient worlds. A caravan did not just carry silk and spices, it transported entire libraries of environmental wisdom. As merchants and travelers moved along the Silk Road, they exchanged more than goods. They shared revolutionary ideas for surviving and thriving within their landscapes. A Persian engineer might describe the intricate mechanics of a qanat to a counterpart from the deserts of North Africa, while Mediterranean sailors, having weathered countless storms, could explain how their coastal cities used specific architectural styles to deflect salty, corrosive winds. These trade routes became the nervous system of a planet slowly awakening to its own collective intelligence, enabling the rapid spread and refinement of environmental techniques across continents. Historical records and architectural evidence show this cross-pollination in stunning detail. The iconic windcatchers of Persia, those towering structures designed to catch even the faintest breeze, clearly influenced the design of similar ventilation systems in North Africa, appearing in regions like Egypt and Tunisia with local adaptations that suited their specific wind patterns. Across the world, the breathtaking rice terraces of the Philippines and China, masterpieces of hydrological engineering that transformed mountainsides into fertile paddies, are believed to have inspired analogous agricultural systems among indigenous cultures in the Americas, such as the sophisticated terraced fields found in the Andes. This was not mere imitation, it was intelligent adaptation. A society would hear of a brilliant water management technique from a distant land and then spend generations tweaking and refining it, blending that foreign insight with a deep, intimate knowledge of their own local soil, climate, and resources. This process of shared learning accelerated innovation at a pace that would have been impossible for any isolated civilization, creating a global reservoir of resilience. How might our modern global collaboration, with its instant communication and vast data networks, achieve a similar leap in sustainability today? The ancient lesson is clear. Our greatest strength in facing a variable climate lies not in isolated competition, but in our shared capacity to learn from one another, adapting the world's best ideas to the unique needs of our own homes. A civilization's survival hinged on its ability to read the sky and feel the shift in the winds. Adaptation was not a desperate reaction, but a continuous, deliberate dance with a climate that was never truly static. The Maya, for instance, did not merely endure droughts, they transformed their entire agricultural approach in response. They would carefully observe rainfall patterns over generations, and when prolonged dry spells threatened their maize fields, they shifted to more drought-resistant crops like cassava and ramon nuts, ensuring a stable food supply even as the rains faltered. In the frigid north, Norse settlements responded to the creeping cold of the Little Ice Age by thickening the sod insulation on their longhouses and redesigning their communal living spaces to better contain precious body heat, a direct architectural response to a changing world. This was adaptation in its purest form, a deep-seated cultural practice of observing long-term weather patterns and proactively adjusting the very bones of their urban systems, their agriculture, and their infrastructure to maintain a hard-won stability. Paleoclimatology, the study of ancient climates, provides sobering evidence of what happened when this adaptive capacity failed. The mighty Akkadian Empire, which once dominated Mesopotamia, appears to have collapsed when it could not adjust its rigid, centralized agricultural systems to a sudden and severe shift towards aridity. Their fields turned to dust and their empire crumbled. In stark contrast, the Khmer Empire in Southeast Asia thrived for centuries by doing the exact opposite. Faced with wildly variable monsoon cycles, they did not just build one reservoir, they expanded their intricate network of barrays, massive artificial lakes that could capture and store immense volumes of water during wet years, creating a buffer that saw them through the inevitable dry ones. These strategies were as diverse as the cultures themselves, from diversifying food sources to avoid a single crop failure, to the entire, gradual relocation of a settlement to a more favorable location, to constant innovation in water storage and distribution. Their resilience was born from a profound acceptance of change itself. So what does this long history of human adaptation whisper to us in an era of our own rapid climate shifts? It teaches us that survival is less about building higher walls against the coming storm, and more about cultivating a societal flexibility, an innate capacity to pivot and redesign our lives in harmony with a dynamic planet. This deep-seated value of flexibility and intelligent response was not just a matter of survival. It was also expressed in the beautiful, purposeful balance they struck in their urban designs, where every street and structure served both the eye and the ecosystem. A city's beauty was never just skin-deep. Stroll through the harmonious plazas of a Renaissance-inspired city, where a central fountain did not merely stand as a monument to art. It was the community's lifeline, its flowing water providing both a cooling visual spectacle and fresh, clean drinking water for all. This was the essence of aesthetic and functional balance, a design philosophy where every urban element was expected to serve a dual purpose, blending artistic expression with undeniable practical benefit. Ornate bronze drainage grates, crafted with intricate patterns, were not just beautiful, they were cleverly designed to prevent leaves and debris from clogging the vital waterways below. A sculpted stone bench lining a public square might also function as a subtle storm barrier, its solid back and heavy base deflecting wind and channeling rainwater away from the walkway. The very idea that a thing could be both useful and beautiful was a foundational principle, not an afterthought. Architectural theorists like Leon Battista Alberti passionately argued that pleasing proportions in a building, those ratios that felt instinctively right to the human eye, did more than please the spirit. They directly improved the structure's integrity and the well-being of those inside. A room with balanced dimensions felt calmer, was easier to heat and cool, and was inherently more stable. This wisdom manifested brilliantly in Islamic cities, where the dazzlingly intricate tilework on a mosque's dome was far more than decoration. The specific glazes used were highly reflective, designed to bounce the sun's intense rays away, actively cooling the interior spaces below. Meanwhile, the mosaics depicting local flora and geometric patterns served as a visual library, educating residents about their native ecosystem and inspiring a deeper connection to their environment. This seamless integration of art and purpose did more than just create efficient cities. It enriched daily life at every turn, fostering a profound sense of pride and ownership in communal spaces. When a public square is both breathtakingly beautiful and supremely functional, people naturally care for it, they linger in it, they become its guardians. So how can our own modern design, which so often separates art installations from utility infrastructure, begin to achieve a similar synergy? What if our bus shelters cleaned the air or our park benches generated power? The ancient lesson is that the most enduring and loved urban spaces are those that speak to both our need for order and our hunger for beauty. This holistic approach to design, where every detail served the whole, naturally extended into the most critical arena of urban life, the innovations that safeguarded public health and sanitation. A city's health was its true wealth, measured not in gold but in the vitality of its people. Long before modern medicine, ancient urban centers engineered their environments to prevent disease, creating public health systems of breathtaking sophistication. The bustling streets of Rome were served by the monumental Cloaca Maxima, a sewer system so effective it remained in use for over 1,000 years, channeling waste away from populated areas and into the Tiber River. Meanwhile, public baths were not mere luxuries. They were essential civic institutions promoting hygiene and social cohesion, their vast complexes supplied by aqueducts delivering fresh water. This commitment to sanitation was a global phenomenon. In the meticulously planned cities of the Indus Valley, like Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro, every house was connected to a covered, centralized drainage network. These brick-lined channels ran beneath the streets, carrying waste to designated disposal pits outside the city walls, a system that would not be rivaled in many parts of the world for millennia. Even personal hygiene was ingeniously addressed, with the Minoans of Crete crafting terracotta pipes for pressurized flow and inventing the world's first known flush toilets, using simple gravity to maintain cleanliness. The understanding that clean water was the cornerstone of public health led to equally advanced purification methods. In medieval Muslim cities, engineers employed large-scale sand filtration beds. Water would be directed through layers of gravel and fine sand, a natural process that trapped sediments and impurities, producing remarkably clear and safe drinking water for the community. These cities also established some of the first dedicated hospitals, often featuring tranquil interior gardens. They recognized that healing was not just about medicine, but about a restorative environment with fresh air, sunlight, and peaceful greenery. This holistic approach to urban well-being dramatically reduced the risk of epidemics like cholera and typhoid, allowing populations to flourish. So what barriers prevent universal access to such foundational sanitation today? The challenge is often not a lack of technology, but a matter of political will, equitable investment, and organized public management. This very necessity, the need to coordinate vast health infrastructure for the collective good, points toward the crucial, often invisible, role of governance in turning brilliant ideas into enduring reality. A royal decree carved into a stone pillar declared that certain forests were to remain forever wild, their trees and animals protected by law. This was not a suggestion, but the iron will of an empire, the edicts of Ashoka in ancient India, one of the world's first recorded environmental policies. Governance was the unseen hand that translated brilliant ideas into enduring reality, creating the legal and social frameworks that made sustainability mandatory, not optional. These systems worked from both the top down and the bottom up. A Byzantine emperor might issue a building code requiring structures to be set back from riverbanks, preventing erosion and protecting water quality for everyone downstream. At the same time, a village council would enforce intricate water sharing agreements, dictating exactly when each farmer could open the irrigation gate to their field, ensuring an equitable distribution that prevented conflict and waste. These were not just rules, they were the collective wisdom of a society codified into action, designed to prioritize the long-term health of the land over any individual's short-term profit. The penalty for over-harvesting timber from a protected grove could be severe, because the community understood that such an act endangered the watershed, the building materials, and the very stability of the hillsides for generations to come. How then can modern governments, often swayed by powerful commercial interests, create policies with similar teeth and foresight? The ancient model suggests that effective environmental law must be rooted in a shared cultural value, one that recognizes ecological health as the non-negotiable foundation of all prosperity. This intricate relationship between law, land, and community belief finds its ultimate expression in the very shape of the city itself, where the symbolic meaning of an urban layout reveals a civilization's deepest understanding of its place in the cosmos. The blueprint of a city was a declaration of its soul. Across the globe, the very layout of streets and plazas was imbued with profound symbolism, transforming urban centers into physical narratives of cultural beliefs and cosmic order. In ancient Chinese capitals like Chang'an, the rigid north-south axial streets and the grid pattern were not arbitrary. They were a direct representation of the Confucian social hierarchy and a belief in a celestial mandate, mirroring the perceived order of the heavens on earth. Every resident, simply by walking these ordained paths, was constantly reminded of their place within a vast, harmonious system. This symbolic dimension was a powerful, silent teacher. As scholar Paul Wheatley observed, a city like Angkor Wat was designed as a microcosm of the entire universe. Its central temple mountain represented the mythical Mount Meru, the axis of the world, while its vast surrounding moats symbolized the primordial oceans. To live and work within this sacred geography was to participate in the cosmic cycle itself, an experience that inherently fostered reverence and a deep sense of responsibility for one's surroundings. This was not unique to Asia. The circular plans of many Native American settlements, such as the Mandan villages along the Missouri River, embodied a worldview of unity with nature and social equality. The circular arrangement, often centered around a sacred space, reflected the cycles of life and the interconnectedness of all community members, with no single direction or dwelling being inherently superior. These symbolic layouts did more than just inspire awe. They actively guided behavior and resource use. When you see your city as a reflection of the cosmos, polluting its rivers or wasting its resources becomes a spiritual transgression, a violation of a sacred trust. So what role can such deep meaning play in our modern, often impersonal urban landscapes? Can we design cities today whose very layouts inspire a sustainable identity, where a park is not just a green space but a representation of a local watershed, or a main street is aligned to celebrate a seasonal solar event, reconnecting us to natural cycles? This profound layer of cultural meaning, however, could not always withstand the pressures of a changing world, and the eventual decline of these integrated practices holds critical lessons for our own time. A great city does not always die with a bang. Sometimes it fades away, grain by grain, as the soil turns to salt. This was the fate that befell the Fertile Crescent of Mesopotamia, where centuries of intensive irrigation without adequate drainage slowly poisoned the land. The very water that gave life carried dissolved salts, which accumulated in the earth with each passing season until the crops could no longer grow. The breadbasket of an empire became a barren crust, and the cities that depended on it were gradually abandoned to the desert winds. This was not a sudden catastrophe, but a slow, creeping failure, a direct result of environmental mismanagement on a colossal scale. The decline of ancient environmental mastery rarely came from a single source, but from a cascade of pressures. A growing population would demand more food, leading to the overexploitation of forests for timber and farmland. This deforestation, in turn, could cause soil erosion and disrupt local rainfall patterns, creating a vicious cycle of scarcity. In some cases, as with the Maya, a combination of prolonged drought and this very cycle of deforestation may have pushed a complex society beyond its breaking point. External invasions could deliver the final blow, but often they were merely finishing the job on a civilization already weakened from within by its own strained relationship with the land. The most poignant cautionary tale may be that of Easter Island. There, a thriving, isolated society slowly consumed the very forests that provided the canoes for fishing, the tools for building, and the rollers for transporting their iconic Moai statues. As the last tree fell, their world shrunk, their society fractured, and a complex culture collapsed into conflict and scarcity, all on an island that was once a verdant paradise. These are not stories of primitive failure, but of intelligent societies that, for various reasons, lost their way and exceeded the ecological limits of their home. The lesson is not that they were foolish, but that their balance was fragile. The civilizations that endured, like the Khmer with their vast water reservoirs or the Egyptians who adapted to the Nile's rhythms, understood that survival meant constant, careful observation and adaptation. So what can we, with our globalized economy and powerful technology, do to avoid repeating these exact same mistakes on a planetary scale? The answer may lie not in inventing more powerful ways to dominate nature, but in reviving that ancient, essential skill of listening to it, of recognizing the limits it imposes, and of designing our societies within those boundaries. This reflection on past collapses brings a new urgency to our current challenges, forcing us to ask how we can actively rebuild the very wisdom we have lost. That ancient blueprint for living is no longer just a relic of the past. Architects today are actively reviving these principles, weaving the intelligence of windcatchers and Chinampas into the very fabric of our modern cities. This is not about abandoning technology, but about creating a powerful fusion where age-old wisdom enhances our most advanced innovations for a more sustainable future. We are learning to build with nature once again. Consider the modern skyscraper that no longer fights the climate but collaborates with it. Inspired by the Persian windcatcher, the Pearl River Tower in Guangzhou, China, uses its sculpted form to funnel wind directly into turbines, generating its own electricity. Its double-skin facade acts like a massive, high-tech version of those thick mud brick walls, creating a buffer zone that drastically reduces the need for air conditioning. This is ancient passive cooling reimagined on a colossal scale. On a more intimate level, look at the resurgence of urban agriculture, directly echoing the Chinampas of Tenochtitlan. In cities like Detroit, vacant lots have been transformed into vibrant community gardens and small-scale farms. These are not just pretty green spaces, they are functional ecosystems that provide fresh, hyper-local food, reduce the urban heat island effect with their vegetation, and manage stormwater by allowing rain to soak into the soil rather than overwhelming sewers. They are modern-day Chinampas, turning urban blight into community bounty. The ambitious Masdar city in Abu Dhabi stands as a grand case study in this revival. Its entire design is informed by traditional Arabic urban planning. Narrow, shaded alleyways create cooling canyon effects, just as they did in ancient desert towns. A central wind tower captures cool breezes from high above and funnels them down into the public plazas below, offering a communal, energy-free cooling system. The city is a living laboratory, proving that the old ways, when paired with new materials and sensors, can create some of the most efficient and comfortable urban environments on Earth. So how can you and your community begin to implement these ideas? It starts locally. A neighborhood can advocate for green roofs on municipal buildings, which provide insulation just like ancient sod roofs, and manage rainwater like the terraced fields of the Andes. You can install a rain barrel in your own garden, practicing decentralized water harvesting like the cisterns of Petra. Supporting local farmers' markets strengthens a resilient, regional food web, much like the integrated farms of ancient cities. Every choice to reduce, reuse, and work with natural cycles is a step toward reviving that ancient mastery. This modern movement to blend the best of the past with the possibilities of the present brings us to a final, powerful reflection on what these smart cities truly leave behind. Their legacy is not just etched in stone, but in the very principles that can guide our future. We have walked through the silent corridors of wind-cooled homes, traced the paths of hidden waterways, and stood in the shadows of cities that breathed with the land. These were not primitive societies stumbling toward survival. They were masters of their environment, achieving a profound sustainability through intelligent design, deep community cooperation, and a sacred respect for the cycles of nature. They show us with stunning clarity that a green city is not a modern invention, but a rediscovered art, an ancient blueprint for living in balance. Their successes offer us a toolkit, and their failures, like the salted fields of Mesopotamia or the vanished forests of Easter Island, serve as stark warnings of what happens when that balance is lost. The path forward is not about abandoning our technology, but about weaving it together with this timeless wisdom. We can build skyscrapers that catch the wind and neighborhoods that grow their own food, creating urban landscapes that are not just efficient, but truly alive. The smartest city of the future may not be the one with the most data, but the one that best listens to the whispers of the past. So we turn this question to you. Which of these ancient techniques captures your imagination the most? Is it the elegant simplicity of the windcatcher, the breathtaking ingenuity of the step well temple, or the communal spirit of the shared water council? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this deep dive into the secrets of history, subscribe for more journeys into the mysteries of our world.